My husband's secret family and the bitter taste of revenge. The only photograph I kept of my husband, Arthur, wasn't from our wedding, nor was it from our vacations on Martha's Vineyard. It was the one of him with a woman named Eleanor. And in her arms was the baby I had always believed could not exist. Welcome back to our storytelling channel. If this is your first time visiting, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the emotional stories we share every week. And now, let's settle in for today's story. My life in the small town of Maple Creek, Ohio, was supposed to be as peaceful as a still life painting. At 65, after Arthur passed from a sudden heart attack last winter, all I wanted was for my remaining days to drift by in the quiet of my garden, accompanied by the chirping of sparrows each morning. Our home, a cozy oak house nestled under ancient maple trees, held the entirety of our 40-year marriage within its walls. Arthur was a good husband. At least, that's what I and this entire town believed. He was the beloved family doctor, a pillar of the community, always present at charity fundraisers and high school football games. His voice was a deep, comforting hum, and his hands, though weathered by the years, were always gentle when they took mine. We didn't have children. A diagnosis decades ago had slammed that door shut, and we had learned to accept it as part of our story. We had each other, and that was enough. But the truth, like a stubborn root, silently cracking through the most solid concrete, always finds a way to break the surface when you least expect it. It all started on a June afternoon while I was cleaning out the attic. The air was thick with the scent of dust and old wood. Sunlight streamed through the single window, creating ethereal beams in the space. Tucked away behind boxes of Christmas decorations, I found a worn leather case that wasn't mine. It was locked, but the latch was rusted, and it popped open with a gentle tug. Inside, there weren't keepsakes from Arthur's youth as I might have expected. There was only one thing: a journal bound in slate blue linen, and a stack of envelopes tied together with a lavender ribbon. My heart began to beat in a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. Lavender. It was the one color Arthur despised. He said the scent made him nauseous. So why was it here? With trembling hands, I opened the journal. The handwriting was feminine, a soft, sloping script. It was a diary, and its author, Eleanor, recounted a secret love affair with my husband that had spanned nearly 20 years. Page by page, my world collapsed. The business trips, Arthur said, were to Chicago were actually to a small lakeside town in Michigan. The late nights he claimed to be at the clinic were spent having candlelit dinners with Eleanor. Our shared grief over being childless, the very thing I thought bound our two souls in a unique sorrow, turned out to be the biggest lie of all. Because Eleanor and Arthur had a son. His name was Samuel. But the greatest shock was yet to come. In an entry dated April the 15th, 98, Eleanor wrote, "He asked me to marry him today. He said he would sort things out with Clara soon. He said his love for her was nothing more than duty, an obligation born of pity. He said his soul belonged to me and to our child, Clara." That's my name. The air left my lungs. Pity. My 40 years were defined by that single word. Not love, not partnership, pity. Rage, like a volcano that had been dormant for too long, began to stir. It was a hot, searing thing, scorching every beautiful memory I had of Arthur. The man I had shared a bed with, the man I had cared for and loved, was a stranger wearing the mask of an angel. And then I found the photograph, the only one in the box. Arthur, looking about 20 years younger, was beaming. It was a smile I had never seen. Not the polite smile he gave his patients, nor the weary one he gave me at the end of the day. It was the smile of a man at the peak of his happiness. Beside him, Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder, her eyes sparkling with pride, and in her arms, a chubby baby boy with the same piercing blue eyes as Arthur. The rage inside me morphed into something colder, sharper. It became hatred. I didn't just want them to hurt. I wanted to destroy the happy little world they had built on my deception and pain. I wanted them to pay. The diary and letters gave me everything I needed. Where Eleanor and Samuel lived now, they were still in that lakeside town. Samuel, now a young man, was probably getting ready for college. A dark thought bloomed in my mind, a plan beginning to form, as cruel as it was sweet, like the taste of poison fruit. I would go to them. I would meet them. But I wouldn't arrive as a betrayed wife seeking the truth. No, I would arrive as an old friend of Arthur's, a bearer of his last effects and final words. I would insert myself into their lives, earn their trust, and then, when they least expected it, I would deliver the killing blow. I would make them feel what it was like to have their world ripped to shreds. We're going to pause the story for just a moment. What are your first feelings? Do you sympathize with Clara? Or do you think revenge will only bring more pain? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button if you're captivated by this story. We love hearing from you. A week later, I was driving north. The car glided along the highway, leaving Maple Creek and 40 years of my life behind me. There were no tears left, only an ice-cold resolve I had prepared meticulously. I read the diary over and over until I had it memorized, learning every detail about Eleanor's life, her habits, her tastes, her fears. I knew she loved lavender, that she enjoyed walks by the lake at sunset, and that she carried a constant, gnawing guilt for being the other woman. That guilt, I told myself, was her weakness, and I would exploit it. The town of Lakeside was as quaint and lovely as Eleanor had described. Pastel-colored houses dotted the shore of a crystal-clear lake. I found her address easily. It was a small white house with a picket fence and a trellis of blooming lavender by the porch. It looked so peaceful, and too peaceful for the storm raging in my chest. I took a deep breath, put on my kindest, most benevolent smile, and walked up to knock on the door. It swung open. Before me stood a woman whose hair was streaked with silver, but whose eyes were still clear and warm. Eleanor. She looked at me quizzically. "Excuse me? Can I help you?" My voice, when it came out, was terrifyingly calm. "Hello, my name is Clara. I was an old friend of Arthur's." A flicker of panic crossed Eleanor's eyes, quickly masked by curiosity. She could never have guessed. In her world, Clara was a vague name, a ghost in a faraway place, not a flesh and blood woman standing on her doorstep. "Please, come in," Eleanor said. her voice trembling slightly. Her home was cozy, filled with light and the smell of baked goods. The walls were covered in photos of a smiling young man, Samuel, my husband's son. I looked at them, my heart twisting, but my expression remained unchanged. I began my story, a narrative woven from half-truths and calculated lies. I told her Arthur and I were merely friends in his final years, that our marriage had long ended in mutual, quiet respect. I said that before he passed, he had asked me to bring her a few memento, and to tell her he was sorry he could never keep his promise. Eleanor cried, tears of relief, of love, of grief. She believed me. She hugged me, thanking me for bringing Arthur back to her. And then Samuel came home, a tall young man with Arthur's blue eyes and Eleanor's smile. He shook my hand, polite and warm. Looking at him, I saw the ghost of another life, a life I could have had. The hatred churned inside me, stronger than ever. My plan was working perfectly. I slowly became a part of their lives. I had dinner with them, walked by the lake with Eleanor, listened to Samuel talk about his future. I became Eleanor's confidant, the one person on earth with whom she could share her story of Arthur. She told me about their love, their sacrifices, her guilt. And I listened, nodding sympathetically, while my heart screamed. The twist wasn't that I would reveal my identity. That was too easy. The twist was Samuel's. In our conversations, Samuel would often ask me about his father's wife. He wanted to know about the woman his father no longer loved. I told him about Clara, but I didn't paint the picture of a pitiful woman. I painted the picture of a domineering, controlling wife, a woman who had suffocated Arthur and forced him to seek escape in another love. In my own telling, I made myself the villain. Why? Because I realized that destroying Eleanor's love for Arthur wasn't enough. I had to destroy Arthur's image in the eyes of the son he adored. I wanted Samuel to see his father not as a romantic hero, but as a roi de Caol who abandoned one woman for his own happiness, and worse, lied to his own son about it. The climax of my plan came on the day of Samuel's 20th birthday. Eleanor had prepared a small, cozy party. I brought a gift. It was the old leather case from my attic. Arthur wanted you to have this when you turned 20, I said to Samuel, my voice thick with fake emotion. He said it was his true legacy. Samuel opened the box. Inside lay his mother's diary and Arthur's love letters. Eleanor went pale. Clara, why? I looked her straight in the eye, for the first time letting my hatred show. Because you took 40 years of my life. Now I'm taking your future. But it was Samuel's reaction that stunned me into silence. He wasn't angry. He picked up the diary, flipped through a few pages, and then looked at me. His blue eyes, Arthur's eyes, held no fury, only a deep, profound sadness. I know, he said softly. I've always known. Mum told me everything years ago. She said that one day the truth would find us, and we would have to face it. He turned to Eleanor, who was crumbling. Mum always taught me that love is complicated. Dad made a mistake, a huge one. But he also gave me my life. And you, Mrs. Peters. He looked back at me. You were a victim in his story too. I'm so sorry. My world tilted on its axis again. My revenge, the sharp weapon I had so carefully honed, was rendered useless against the maturity and compassion of a young man. He didn't hate his father. He didn't despise his mother. He pitied me. Pity. There it was again. But this time, it came from an entirely different place. It wasn't the pity of a liar for his victim. It was the compassion of a clear soul for a heart that had been turned to stone by hatred. The icy wall I had built around myself began to melt. Tears, which I thought had long run dry, streamed down my face. I wept for the 40 lost years, for my own loneliness, for a revenge plot that had failed so spectacularly. Not because it was discovered, but because it was meaningless. I had wanted to destroy them, but in the end, the only person I had destroyed was myself. The hatred had consumed me from the inside out, turning me into a person I didn't even recognize. I left Lakeside that night. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. As I drove through the darkness, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the reflection of a tired old woman with swollen eyes and an empty future. Revenge isn't sweet. It just leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. My story doesn't have a happy ending where everyone forgives and embraces. Life isn't always like that, but it does have a beginning. The beginning of acceptance. Accepting that the past cannot be changed, that the betrayal was real, and so was the pain. But hatred is a choice. I had chosen wrong. Now I am learning to choose again. I don't know where I'll go or what I'll do, but for the first time in months, I feel a flicker of hope, not for a new love or a perfect happiness, but hope that one day I can look in the mirror and forgive the woman I see. Hope that one day I can truly let Arthur go and finally begin a life of my own, one that isn't defined by his love or his betrayal. And that's the end of our story for today. A tale of love, lies, and the painful journey back to oneself. What did you think of Clara's final decision? Do you think she can find peace? Share this story with someone you love and let us know your thoughts. And remember, your likes and subscriptions are our greatest encouragement to keep creating more content. Thank you, and see you next time.